Almost functioning. I'm Alan Piper.
And I'm Zincle Asamoah.
And we are at Congresswoman Maxine Waters' Millennial Media Row event. It is an event that started last year in conjunction with the State of the Union. The State of the Union is not happening this evening, but Congresswoman Waters' house party is still going on.
Yes, that's right. And so there are a lot of members of Congress who we are going to be speaking to this evening to hear about their upcoming policies, their thoughts on the shutdown, and much more. So our first guest is Congressman Garcia. Thank you for being with us.
How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Good.
So can you just tell our viewers who don't know, who do you represent and what do you kind of...
Yeah, and absolutely. In full disclosure, because I know we're live streaming and we have these lights, I have on no makeup right now, so I may look a little, to some of the...
Well, that's a big part of that bill.
But I represent the 33rd Congressional District in Dallas, and I look a little, to Commerce Committee and the Small Business Committee. And I'm really excited because I have to tell you, I've been involved in politics now for 20 years. I was a congressional staffer, I was in the state legislature, and now this is my fourth term in Congress, and so after 20 years, this is my first time in the majority. And so I'm really happy to have the opportunity to lead and be part of a group that's leading instead of always reacting. And I think that the agenda that the American people will see from this Democratic-led Congress, I think they're going to like it.
And you mentioned you've served for 20 years, and we just experienced the longest shutdown in
Well,
history.
right.
What do you have to say?
We were so happy that we were
it
able
was
to
terrible.
do that video.
And look, each one of our districts are different. And do I have as many government employees that I represent as Anthony Brown, who represents George County? No, absolutely not. I mean, he's right here, right next to D.C., and Brother Brown represents a lot of government employees. But in Fort Worth, for instance, we have a currency plant. We have two downtown federal buildings, one in Fort Worth, one in Dallas. We have a FAA regional office. We have defense contractors. We have a lot of people that are dependent on the government staying open, and it's a big part of our economy, and they perform a lot of functions for people. And for those workers to not get their checks over foolishness, I thought was absolutely terrible. And so I'm glad that it's temporarily reopened, and I hope that within these 3 weeks that we can come up with something that is going to be good. And we don't need to waste money, right? We don't need to waste money on laws. If you look at where drugs come through and where human smuggling and human trafficking takes place, if the wall is not going to deter people. We need to, invest in better and more personnel and give the personnel that we have on the front lines a raise so they can do their jobs more effectively and morale can be high. We need to also make sure that we are investing in the latest technologies like car scanning devices, because most of those drugs and those illegal activities I talked about, they're coming in through ports of entry, and everybody knows that. And the wall is just a big waste of money. We need to work together to find solutions, and that's what we want to do in this Democratic-led Congress.
And two more questions for you. You represent Texas, which is right on the border. So do you believe there should be a wall? What compromises would you be willing to make?
No, a wall is before this Donald Trump fiasco of he's going to shut the government down over the wall, and in his own words he said that it was going to be his shutdown. I had long been against the wall. If you talk, and I don't represent a border city, but I've been to the border enough to know that when you talk to people, for instance, in agribusiness, the people that feed us every day, they will tell you that a wall makes it harder for them to do their business and their work. Even those ranchers that are very conservative, they don't want a wall. Everybody knows that the wall would just be ineffective. It's about symbolism and the fact that Trump is willing to listen to, the Ann Coulters and the Laura Ingrams of the world, and these Rush Limbaugh, these talk radio show hosts, instead of actually listening to the American people, I think is really sad and a very unfortunate commentary on where the Republican Party is today.
And lastly, what do you say to young people who might be discouraged about the recent government happenings?
I would say for young people, stay encouraged, first of all. Trump is not going to be in office that much longer. We have some elections that are going to be coming up. And we need for people to exercise their right to vote, because a record number of people in many states went and exercised their right to vote in a midterm election. This time around, they took the midterm just as seriously as they had presidential elections in the past. We were able to make historic change. We have a very diverse Congress like we've never seen before. We have Congressional Black Caucus members now that represent districts that are less than 5% African American. Like that is how diverse this new Congress is. And we need to make sure that young people see that diversity. We need to see that young people see that there's a diversity of idea and thoughts here.
Yep.
We need for young people to know that we have that we're protecting the sanctity of our electoral system. Along with Mr. Sarbanes, I'm working on HR 1, which I think is going to be a really milestone piece of legislation that is going to make sure that we protect people's right to vote, that we make voting easier, that we address money in politics, and some of those other things that we think that would encourage young people to be more active. And I would always tell young people, make sure that you volunteer. I got my job, I got my start in politics by volunteering, and then I started off as a congressional staffer, ran for office in the state legislature, and now I'm in my 4th term in Congress.
Wow.
So get out there,
Yeah.
Start off, make a phone call, go volunteer, learn the ropes, and then maybe run for office one day, or maybe be one of these amazing young people that are actually doing so much of the work that you never see in front of the camera.
But it's
They're
happening.
doing a lot of the work. A lot of these young people are absolutely brilliant.
Yep.
And we would not be able to do the things that we do in Congress without them. And a lot of them are really movers and shakers here on Capitol Hill. So there's a variety of different ways for young people to get involved.
Great.
And we want them to.
Well, thank you so much. Again, we just spoke with Congressman VC, and now I'll turn it over to Alan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Who is the author of the
Yeah,
very
and we'd love to
first
get-
bill in the Democratic House. Tell us what is in H.R. 1 and why is it the top priority for House Democrats?
So what's in H.R. 1 is all the things that can make our democracy work again. It's the top priority because we know that the average person out there is totally fed up with Washington. They feel like they're left out and locked out of their own democracy, and they're pretty accurate about that. When you look at how business is done up here, special interests, big money, lobbyists, insiders, they're the ones that call the shots. The average person is kind of sitting out there with their nose pressed up against the glass, looking in on decisions being made for them, but without their priorities being at the center of it. So what H.R. 1 would do is, in 3 major areas, it would say it's time for the people to get their power back. Number 1, let's make it easier, not harder, to vote in America. Let's make it possible for people to get to the ballot box without it being an obstacle course. So that's universal automatic voter registration across the country, early voting, absentee ballot voting, making sure we have the capacity on election day to handle the lines, recruiting and training poll workers, all the stuff that's about being able to cast your vote in America. Reforming how we do redistricting, getting rid of partisan gerrymandering, so it's done in an independent way that respects the voters, so the voters can feel proud of the process. So that's key, make it easier, not harder to vote. Second thing, when you go to Washington, behave yourself, right? That's pretty simple. The idea is act ethically, act in a transparent way, be accountable to the voters. So we've got a lot of good provisions in there that police conduct up here, so that people will act in an ethical way in the public's trust, exercise these offices by paying attention to what the public wants, not for personal advancement or for your own personal brand like some people are doing around here. Last thing is, don't get tangled up in the money. When you go to Washington, remember where you came from. Represent the voters who sent you. Do not answer to the lobbyists. Do not answer to the big money crowd or the PACs or the super PACs. Represent the people. And we've got great measures in H.R. 1 to disclose where the secret money comes and to give power to those small donors out there, so they're the ones that own the system, they're the ones that call the shots, they're the ones that write the laws. That's what H.R. 1 is. It's all about power.
So, not to oversimplify, but it sounds like it's all about making voting easier and fairer,
Yes.
strengthening ethics, and getting big money out of politics.
You got it, perfect.
Now, how do you
get an A?
Okay. Now,
Okay.
this is the bill in the House. What's
Yes.
going to happen in the Senate?
What's going to happen in the Senate? Mitch McConnell has already said, he's tweeting today, that he will not let H.R. 1 come to a vote in the United States Senate. Fine, if he wants to stand between the American people and their democracy with his arms crossed, be my guest, because the public is going to roll that over. And we are going to, for the next 2 years, we're going to keep sending H.R. 1 over there. If we get it passed here, and we need everybody's help to make that happen, we're going to send it to the Senate every single day and say, why aren't you passing this? Democrats, I think, are the pro-democracy party right now. If Mitch McConnell wants to take the position of he and the Republicans being the anti-democratic party, then he should go right ahead, because he's going to learn a lesson politically from that in 2020. So we're going to keep pounding the pavement, hitting the airwaves, beating the drum around H.R. 1, build that momentum, and if people, look, either you lead, follow, or you get out of the way. McConnell doesn't want to lead on democracy reform, and he doesn't want to follow, then he should get out of the way and let people who want to restore our democracy take the lead. That's what H.R. 1 is all about. That's what we're going to be pushing over the next 2 years. But we need the American public to stand up and say they want this, and with that kind of power behind us, eventually we're going to get it done.
So you think that people could call their senators or call
Absolutely.
their representative and tell them
Call
about
them.
H.R. 1?
Email them, tweet them, do whatever you can to say H.R. 1, the For the People Act. That's what it's called, For the People. Call them, tell them H.R. 1 is the #1 priority. That's why we made it H.R. 1, because we heard what the American people were telling us in the 2018 election. Make this the first order of business. So call everybody up here and tell them, you got to get this done. This is our democracy. We the people are the rightful owners of this democracy, and H.R. 1 is the way we're going to get it back.
Okay. Well, Congressman, thank you so much,
you.
and good luck with that.
All the best. Take care.
Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
And I think that Zinkley is ready to go with another member of Congress.
That's right. We are here with Congressman McGovern. Thanks so much for being with us.
Happy to be with you.
So can you tell our viewers who you represent and how long you've been serving?
Well, I represent the people in the 2nd Congressional District in Massachusetts. I first got elected in 1996. I've been there ever since.
Wow.
You know, I really feel privileged to represent the voters of Massachusetts.
Well, to start, congratulations on the Patriots.
Thank you. They're going to do well on Sunday. Yeah.
So how are you feeling about the most diverse Congress ever?
I'm excited about it. It's unbelievable. It's inspiring. We not only have the most diverse Congress, I think, in our history, but we also, this new freshman class are filled with energy and passion. They want to make a difference, and they're going to make a difference. I mean, and they think in big, bold thoughts. And they're not going to be content with the status quo, so I'm really excited about them.
And you said you've served since 1996.
That's correct.
Have you ever seen anything like the shutdown we just experienced?
I never have, because this is the longest shutdown in American history. It represented an all-time high in recklessness and stupidity. I mean, he shut down a big chunk of the government over a stupid, immoral wall. I mean that will cost, in the end, tens of billions of dollars. He said Mexico was going to pay for it, but he was now asking the taxpayers to pay for it. But it represents all that I think the United States does not represent. When I think of the kind of the greatness of the United States, I think of the Statue of Liberty. When Donald Trump thinks of the greatness of the United States, he thinks of a concrete wall, separating us at the border. I mean, I think it's disgusting. The only wall we need is to build a wall around the White House, to keep the xenophobes from, getting out. I mean, it is really quite tragic that this man is president, and I think he is. Again, he represents all the things and all the values that I don't have. I mean, the things that he stands for are the things that I stand against.
And part of what you've stood for during your tenure in office has been SNAP benefits. Can you talk to us about?
I mean,
that?
I've been one of my passions has been fighting hunger in this country. I mean, we're the richest country in the history of the world, and yet there's 40 million Americans who don't know where the next meal is going to come from. I'm ashamed of that fact. As a United States citizen, as a member of Congress. And hunger is a political condition. I mean, we have the money to end it, we have the infrastructure to end it, but we don't have the political will. I mean, Trump can come up with billions for a stupid wall, but when it comes to ending hunger in this country, we're told we don't have any money. And SNAP, which used to be known as food stamps, is one of the premier nutrition programs to help people not go hungry. And this shutdown, if it went on a little bit longer, would have impacted people's SNAP benefits. People literally would not have gotten a benefit for food. People would have gone hungry in this country. Kids would have lost, access to school lunches. We would have had the WIC program cut. I think one of the lessons I hope we learn from this shutdown is that government is important, and some people rely on it. in a big way, like those who rely on SNAP, and we can't afford to ever do this again. And I hope the president's not stupid enough to repeat his mistake a second time. But we need to do everything we can to prevent him from doing that.
And do you think it could happen again? What are you willing to compromise to avoid that?
Look at it. I'm willing to work with him on border security. I'm not willing to work with him on a stupid wall. I mean, the wall is a waste of money. You know, it's a racist dog whistle to to his most extreme opponents. That's not what this country stands for. Yes, we need to invest more in modern technology. Whether it's sensors or drones or more personnel at the border. I mean, that I can work with him on, but not a wall. I mean, a wall is just a waste of money, and it betrays our values in this country. I mean, look, we're a nation of immigrants. We should celebrate our diversity in this country, and yet so much of what's coming out of the White House is about distancing ourselves from our diversity. He's not proposing a wall on our northern border. He's only proposing a wall on our southern border. Because he doesn't want immigrants coming in from, south of border. I mean, those immigrants with darker skin, and he obviously has a problem with that. Well, those of us who want a more inclusive and a more diverse country, want to celebrate diversity, we need to stand firm. We need to stand up, and we need to push back against his kind of intolerance.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
Well, we just heard from Congressman McGovern, and now I'm going to toss back to Alan.
Thank you, Zinkler.
Thank you.
I'm here with Congresswoman Norma Torres from California's 35th District. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, I'm so happy that you've come to join us. Now, I was chatting before we went on camera with the Congresswoman. You were talking about how one of your key issues is affordable housing.
Absolutely. It is, for the communities that I represent, affordable housing is the key to ensuring that our families are getting out of poverty. Many of the jobs that I have in my community are low-wage jobs, minimum wage, and very little for families to be able to move into the middle class. So ensuring that we have housing that is affordable and sustainable for them is one of my priorities.
And how do we do that?
We do that by working with our local governments, ensuring that they are zoning areas in their communities that are quality, not just rezoning areas where they don't necessarily want to build the type of housing, because we know that that has been the norm, right? We have to hold them accountable to ensure that they don't say no to projects that are going to house single people. For example, there is a need for efficiency types of units, and they're not building those because they don't feel that they bring in the type of medium incomes that they would like to have in the community.
And is there too much emphasis on, now there should be luxury housing in the world, there should be wonderful places to live, but is there too much emphasis on luxury housing and not enough on affordable housing that's within the reach of most people? And how do we find the balance of making it profitable for someone to invest in a building, right, and it still be something that is good for the community as well as the developer?
Right, and I think that there is some education there that needs to happen, right? When people think about affordable housing, they think it's substandard housing, that they think that it's going to be dilapidated, they think that it's going to be this horrific, barn that is going to be built in their community. And I think affordable housing is far, more than that, right? But it is up to the local planning developers working with their local city council to ensure that the affordable units are actually affordable for the people that live there and for the future generations that are aging out and have no place to live. For developers, obviously they're in it to make money, but again, if they want to build in my community, I think that we need to hold them to a higher standard. Yes, they can make money on some of the units, but they need to reserve at least half of the units that they build for more affordable.
And for our viewers, where in Southern California does your district span?
So I represent a bit of LA County, the west end of LA County, and the east end of San Bernardino County. Think of my district as the suburbs for the people that work in West Los Angeles and Santa Monica, downtown Los Angeles.
And so housing is a priority for you. What's another one of your priorities and priorities for your constituents in the Southern California?
So housing is a big priority, but the other priority is ensuring that our displaced workers that suffered so much during the downturn in the economy, that they are able to bounce back and that they are able to get the technical skills that they need in order to fill the types of jobs that are being created right now. Ensuring that our community colleges are affordable for them to be able to go into technical training, ensuring that our universities, are also an affordable place to go, that are taking the priority of the needs of the community and training those workers in the skill sets that they actually need to fill the jobs of today, not some futuristic, pie in the sky type of job that may never come. That is a challenge for me, ensuring that young people, when they graduate from school, that they don't come home with a mortgage type of, school loans that they have to pay back. That is the reason why our economy has not, has been stale for them, because they come out of these learning institutions with these high loans, high interest rates, and in my eyes, that is criminal. We need to be helping them because they are the future leaders of this country. They are the job creators of the future, and they cannot sustain themselves with having mortgage types of student loans.
Okay, and then of course another issue of paramount importance to the Southern California area. Which team are you going to be rooting for in the Super Bowl next weekend?
The LA Rams, of course.
Okay, well that seems to be not a controversial stand that you've taken.
That is great.
But I wish you the best with that. Thank you
you
so much for joining us tonight.
Absolutely, it's great to be
Thank you. Have a good night.
The process of
And?
being transferred from one location to another.
Yes, we are live with Congresswoman Houlihan, and thank you for being with us.
Of course.
So if you can tell our viewers kind of a little bit more about yourself, who do you represent, and how long have you been in Congress?
So I represent the people of the Pennsylvania 6th Congressional District, which is a little bit west and north of Philadelphia. So it is Westchester and Reading are the largest cities, and it's a beautiful part of Pennsylvania and the nation. In terms of how I found myself in Congress and how long I've been here for about 3 weeks now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'm one of those newbies. I'm one of the 63 Democratic freshmen and a couple dozen Republican freshmen who are here. And combined, we are more than a quarter of the total Congress right now.
And how has it been, your first 3 weeks in office?
Of course, it's been different than I think people would have expected because we were sworn into a shutdown government, and I think that's a pretty remarkable experience that many people, I don't think any people have had except for our class, and so that's been a remarkable experience of working under that sort of conditions and trying to work our way through that. But it's also been an experience where we are working on other legislative agendas that have to do with making sure that we restore affordable care to people in healthcare, making sure that we talk about ethics in government and access to the ballot, and making sure that we talk about violence and gun safety. And those kinds of things have also been things that we've been working on.
And you mentioned, so you just proposed your first bill. Can you tell us
did.
about what that was like and
I
also
did.
what the bill is comprised of?
We called it the Shutdown to End All Shutdowns Act, and basically what it is a proposed bill that is supported by 20 or so of my freshman class, and we're looking to try and take the lessons that we learned as new people coming into Congress with eyes wide open and listening to our constituents both on the campaign trail and over the last few weeks to try and make sure that this shutdown that just happened to all of us is the last shutdown that ever happens to all of us. And basically what it does is it puts teeth into shutting down the government that punish or penalize the very people who shut it down to begin with. So the legislative branch and the executive branch are being asked to make the sacrifices, frankly, that we asked the people to make in the last several weeks.
And you are no stranger to public service. Can you talk to us about your background in that sense?
So I have a really eclectic background. I started life right after undergraduate school. I was an engineer, joining the military. I was an ROTC scholarship. Following that, did a graduate degree also in engineering. I've run a company that focuses on basketball apparel and footwear and helped grow and scale that. And then from there, worked in urban education, teaching chemistry, and finally running a nonprofit that focuses on early childhood literacy.
That is very
And then
eclectic.
I started running for Congress.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what led you here? Why did you run? And what do you say to people like you who may be considering?
I did this because I felt, first of all, that I had good experience that I thought was useful to bring to bear for all of us. I think there aren't nearly enough people in Congress who have maybe STEM professional or STEM backgrounds, who are educators, who are veterans, who are women. I think all of the diversity of experience is needed in Congress right now in particular. And so I kind of took a little bit of a self-inventory after the last presidential election and realized that I thought I had a lot to offer in the way of experience. And so if other people have that idea that they feel like that they have a singular reason to run, I would absolutely encourage them to do that. And what I would also say is there's lots of ways to participate in the democracy, and they don't all have to be running for office. They can be helping somebody to do that, or just writing a letter, or making a phone call, or just watching a video.
Mm-hmm. And I want to go back to the shutdown and end on that. Do you think your bill, the shutdown to end all shutdowns, will pass? And do you think we'll have another government shutdown once February 15th comes?
I sure hope not in terms of having another shutdown. What I can say is that there have been a few bills that have been put forward, all with ideas of how to not do this again. The bill that we put forward is the only one that actually has these teeth to it, that actually has real consequences to people. And so I believe it's the beginning of a very important conversation. I believe we need to legislate to make sure that this is not one of the bows in the quiver that we have to be able to lever on each other no matter what party we are in or on. We shouldn't be doing this to one another. And so I'm hopeful that this is at least the beginning of a conversation and hopefully something even more.
Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman.
You're welcome. You're very welcome.
And again, we just spoke with Congresswoman Houlihan about the shutdown and her first 3 weeks in office. Wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are here with Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia. And Congressman, you are part of the wave of history makers in this new Congress. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm very excited to be part of the freshman class of the 116th Congress as a Mexican immigrant boy who came to Chicago 53 years ago. I'm delighted to be here with all the women, with all the young people that have been elected to this class, with the many people of color from coast to coast. This will be an impactful Congress, and I feel so honored to be a part of this class.
And why is it so important that we have now the most diverse Congress that we've ever had?
Because the class of the 116th Congress is the most diverse. It looks like America. It feels like America. People came to the Congress to make an impact on the issues that they feel most passionate about, the basic issues in life, whether it's increasing the minimum wage, addressing the need for more housing in areas all over the country, or guys like me who came here because we want to see an infrastructure bill across America in urban areas, in rural areas. We want to make sure that we modernize our existing infrastructure, that we go green in our society so that we become a sustainable country and a society, that we address climate change while we help people move efficiently and rapidly from their houses to work, to school, to play, enjoy life more effectively, and to have a better quality of life. So we've come here to address all these issues, and I think you will find that this is a very forceful class, and I think it portends what the future of America and the types of issues that the Congress will be addressing as we move forward in the 21st century.
Now, infrastructure is one of those words that people talk about. It's a nice big word, and it sounds a little abstract, I think, to a lot of people. But it's very, it has a direct impact on everyone's lives. Can you talk about, what are you talking about? You're talking about roads, bridges, trains?
Let me break it down to you in simple terms. Chicago is suffering because of a disinvestment that has occurred in several communities, which happen to be the poorest, where people of color, especially African Americans and Latinos, have lived in for a long time. They have the poorest schools, they have the highest levels of violence. What those communities need and yearn for is economic investment. We can invest in those communities, but we need help from the federal government, from Washington, D.C., by rebuilding the pipes, the leaded pipes that need to be replaced, that are harming children and their brains and their ability to learn. We can create economic activity in those communities by putting people to work, young men who have not experienced work life yet, who have lived in poverty over several generations. That can be transformed by an infrastructure bill, while we also invest in the transit systems in cities like Chicago, but also in rural areas, in rural states across the country, so that we move people to jobs, from jobs back home, and people enjoy a greater quality of life without having to marry a car and then maintain the car, pay insurance in the car, pay gas for the car. When the car breaks down, have more maintenance, have to pay insurance on the car. If we had better transit systems, especially in urban areas, we would improve the quality of life. Investing in infrastructure also means having high-speed rail. Investing in infrastructure means connecting people in rural areas with broadband so that they can have access to the internet, access to information that helps them produce goods in farm areas and move those goods to the marketplace where they can improve their quality of life. So I'm talking about infrastructure as a way to create many millions of jobs in America, stimulate the economy, improve the quality of life for everyone in America while we rebuild crumbling bridges, interstate highways that are dilapidated, and while we do those things in a green manner so that we invest in green infrastructure in everything that we do so that we can address climate change while stimulating the economy and raising people's incomes and standards of living. This is an area that has the greatest potential for rising above the partisan divide in Washington because it will help Republicans in rural areas of the country. It will help Democrats who live in the cities and where Democratic voters tend to be have a greater concentration. And most of all, it will help bring economic prosperity across the board. So this is one of the issues that rises above the partisan divide that Washington has been so famous for.
And this is actually something that the president has talked about, that he wants to, he's declared that he's a builder.
Yes.
He has claimed that he wants to invest in infrastructure. So far, it's mostly manifested in investing in a wall, but do you feel that there is the possibility for bipartisan agreement on investing in other forms of building that are not walls?
I think this is probably the greatest opportunity that we will have over the next 2 years in our country to agree upon addressing the infrastructure needs, whether it's water systems everywhere in America, improving our roads, investing in light rail so that people can move about more efficiently, rebuilding bridges. But at the root of all of this is putting people to work, creating more modernized ways of living for both rural and people in urban areas, and we don't have to have partisan bickering over it because the prosperity that investing in our infrastructure brings is good for everyone in America, regardless of race, regardless of sex or ethnicity or where they were born. Infrastructure is good for everyone, and if we can find the courage to pass a bill that has equity in it, everyone stands to benefit from it.
All right. Well, I think we'd all like to see something like that. Well, Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I'm going to pass it now back to Zinkley. Thank you so much.
Could we pull up 2 chairs?
Can you hold 1 minute, Rob? Hi, okay, yeah, let's do that. Great idea.
Zinkley's going to
Thanks.
talk to Congressman Cohen.
Yeah, not a problem at all.
They're done. They'll cut back to us. All right. Well, I'm happy to have a fellow New Yorker here. Where are you from, New York? I'm
we're
from
about to go live.
Congresswoman Maloney's district in the East Village. Yes. Pretty close. Yeah, on First Avenue. Yes. I got to tell you, the one silver lining of this whole administration.
Well, we are here with Congressman Cohen from Tennessee. Thank you for being with us.
Now this.
Now this.
Yes.
We're going to talk about what's going on now.
The whole day has gone on till now, and now we're this.
And now we're this.
Yes.
Well, thank you for being with us.
Good to be with you.
Could you tell our viewers who you represent and what committees you're on?
I represent the people of Memphis, Tennessee, the 9th Congressional District of Tennessee, but we talk about Memphis because that's where we're from. And I'm on Judiciary and I'm on Transportation, and this year I'll also be on the Science Committee. I'll be the chairman of the Judiciary Subcommittee on Constitution, Civil Rights, and Civil Liberties. And I'm also on the Helsinki Commission, which deals with the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, human rights in Europe and thereabouts.
Those are some big committees.
There's good committees. I've had Transportation and Judiciary since I was a freshman, and this is my first year in community college, if you consider from first grade to I'm now in the 13th grade.
And one of your areas of focus has been student loans. A lot of our audience is millennials. Can you talk to us about what your policies and proposals are around that?
Ali in free. Yeah, we were the majority from 2007 to 2011 on Judiciary. That's where bankruptcy laws go, and I was the chair of a committee that dealt with bankruptcy. Up until 2005, when there was a bankruptcy bill passed that really messed over consumers terribly. Private student loans were dischargeable in bankruptcy, like every other kind of private debt that existed, it could be discharged in bankruptcy. But in 2005, they carved out, because of moneyed interest representing the private student loan people, student debt. And they said it was not dischargeable. So I've had a bill since I've been up here, and I'm introducing it again tomorrow with Representative Danny Davis of Chicago and Eric Swalwell of the Northern California area, to allow private student debt to be bankrupted. Now, obviously, it wouldn't just be for anybody. You go to college for 4 years or 5 years or whatever, then all of a sudden, I want to bankrupt, I want to get all my college debt out of the way, and then I want to go and make a lot of money. You'd have to have some basis to show as a hardship. But right now, it's impossible to get. And it's not right to treat private student debt separate from all other private debt. Auto loans, home loans, credit card loans, you name it. And it's just something that the insider folks who lobbied up here got, and that's one of the worst bills Congress ever passed.
Really?
Yeah.
And how likely do you think this is to pass?
It could pass now in the Democratic majority. I think Democrats will embrace it because Democrats care about people in debt, care about people who are trying to make it and become part of the American dream, the middle class hoping to succeed. And that's people that get college debt and go to school to educate themselves to participate in the economies. The Republicans aren't so keen on that. They're more in favor of the lender. They're business oriented, and they've never been very good on the issue. But we've got a majority. That was a big deal. Voting matters. Democrats won. We got the House. So I think it could pass the House. I think we can get it through. Now, the Senate will be more difficult because you got to have 60 votes. You not only have to get all the Democrats, which you probably could, but you got to get 12 Republicans. And it's tough to find 12 Republicans that'll vote for young people, people in debt, people in need. They're more likely to be for business.
And can you remind our viewers what's the name of that bill?
It's just the Private Student Bankruptcy Law Bill.
Okay.
I might have another name for it.
That works for us for
Okay.
now. And you mentioned the new Democratic majority. What has it been like with that majority, with this shutdown going on the last 3 weeks?
Well, the shutdown's gone on for a while, and it's not been, it's really been longer than 3 weeks, but it was 35 days. But the whole time we've been, I think we came in January 3rd, and until this week, we were all in shutdown. That affected some Congress people as well as citizens. The citizens really got the worst of it, particularly the federal employees and contractors and people who had businesses near federal employees that depended on those folks, like for lunch. They had a lot of times cafes near federal facilities, and that was a lot of their business gone. 30 days, zero.
Yeah.
It's been strange because the job of government is to make sure that government works, that you have services, that you have a functioning government. And when you shut down, you fail. And Donald Trump failed. 35 days, he got an F.
Well, thank you for your time, Congressman Cohen.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Again, we've been speaking with Congressman Cohen from Tennessee. He talked to us about his upcoming bill about student loans and much more. So thank you again for being with us.
Y'all come to Memphis.
We should. I've never been.
The best civil rights museum in the world.
Oh, wow.
The best barbecue. And a whole bunch of, we have barbecue, National Civil Rights Museum. Dr. King unfortunately died in Memphis, but the location where he died, the Lorraine Motel, has been made into the National Civil Rights Museum. which is a phenomenally good museum. And that's a great site. Stax Records, Sun Records, Graceland, barbecue, catfish,
what more could
fried
you
chicken.
ask for?
It's fun.
Thank you
Come
so
to
much.
Memphis.
Thank you.
And now
Thank
we're here with New York's Congressman Espaillat. Congressman, thank you so much for being here this
Thank you
evening.
for having me. Thank
Now,
you.
we were talking before the camera joined us, we were talking about immigration.
Yes.
What do Democrats intend to do for immigration?
Well, I think all polls show, even before the shutdown, that Dreamers had lots of support in red districts, Republican districts, in Democratic districts, in red states and blue states. They had over 80% support among the general population. And so we need to help them. We need to bring them in. In addition to that, we have temporary protected status, the TPS recipient. People that have left their countries because of a natural disaster, because of violence, war. This has been the tradition of our nation to allow these people to seek asylum and come here. We should bring them in. So if we're able to do DACA, TPS recipient, and DAPA, which are the parents of the DACA recipients, I think we're in good shape to bring some level of relief, maybe to half of the population that's here undocumented. And we could talk about ports of entry, and we could talk about increasing the number of judges, and we could talk about having a humane and practical border security. But I think there needs to be an agreement by us and the Senate, first before it gets to the President, on what the road is to take.
Now, in the interests of protecting Dreamers and their parents, if, and I have no idea if such a thing would be in the offering, but if a deal were offered where the DREAM Act could be passed with protection for Dreamers, citizenship for Dreamers, and protection for their parents, would that be worth agreeing to some funding of a wall?
We don't support a wall, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Dreamers ask us not to support a wall. They shouldn't be a bargaining chip for a medieval answer to a modern problem. Immigration is not just a U.S. dynamic, it is a worldwide dynamic. You know, Africans migrate to Europe. You know, Libyans migrate to Italy. Guatemalans migrate to Mexico. Mexicans migrate here. Haitians to the Dominican Republic, where I'm from. Dominicans to Puerto Rico and the United States. It's a worldwide dynamic of the have and the have-nots, and a medieval wall will not stop that. We must look deeper into the situation, and we have proposed to look at the root causes of immigration in the triangle countries of Central America, so we could begin to address them. And we could begin to address the needs of those regions of the world so we can stem immigration a little bit. But I think that to propose a wall, a medieval answer to a modern problem, is not the way to go.
All right, so if Democrats are not going to go for a wall, do you think that the president will accept some alternative to a wall, or do you think that the government is going to close down again in 3 weeks?
God knows what he will accept, but he should really look at it, and this is something that he always looks at, the polls, and he's in a meltdown. He's in a total meltdown where all the polls across the board are blaming him for the shutdown, are saying that we should not hold government or 800,000 federal workers hostage for a wall. They don't agree that the country is going in the right direction. The recent polls taken all show that the public opinion, and everything is public opinion to some degree, is going in that direction. So if he does care about that, and obviously he does because he spends his nights tweeting, he should really support whatever consensus we reach between the Senate and the House of Representatives.
And if he were to declare a state of emergency and attempt to build a wall without the authorization of Congress, what would Democrats be forced to do?
Well, that will be litigated in the courts, not necessarily by Democrats in Congress, but I'm sure that the advocate groups out there will run right to the courts. And with regards to DACA and TPS, the courts have already offered us breathing room. So he's really giving us nothing by saying that he's going to give us a temporary 3-year extension of those two programs. The courts have already said, and the Supreme Court did not take up the DACA issue, that what he did to eliminate those executive orders was an illegal act. So he's not putting any substantial or responsible proposal on the table. This is just a shell game.
Now, I want to ask you, since we are both New Yorkers, and the president has been characterizing immigration as a real threat to this country. He has been linking immigration to crime, and he has not only been singling out illegal immigration or undocumented immigration, he has been attempting to reduce legal immigration as well.
Yes.
We live in a city that is so greatly shaped by immigrants, and yet we have a very low crime level. The lowest, I believe it's the lowest crime level per capita
That's correct.
in the nation.
And the false notion that immigrants commit crime is something that he uses often, but all studies and research show that immigrants commit a lower level of crimes than people like you and I. I don't know of any undocumented immigrant that comes out of his or her house looking to get arrested and get deported anymore. So he's using this scapegoating the immigrant community, but on the other hand, he's also fabricated a crisis in the border because there's far less immigration across the border than ever before. And in fact, funding has increased the level of enforcement, of law enforcement at the border. So there is no crisis there. There may be a humanitarian crisis because the moms that come with their little children across the border often get to those states decimated, really in bad health and in dire condition. But there is a no security issue at the border that, as he speaks of it. The ports of entry need to be supervised. We should be spending monies on scanners. We should be spending money on modernizing our ports of entry, which is where all the fentanyl, the drug that are fueling the opioid crisis, are coming through the ports of entry. The human trafficking is coming through the ports of entry. Illegal arms that come into our country are coming, guess where? Through the port of entry. And not every vehicle, every truck that goes through there is scanned for any illegal contraband.
And the president has talked also about the cost of immigration. Do immigrants contribute more to the economy, or do they take more away from the economy?
Far more. You know, immigrants pay taxes, sales taxes, in many ways, shapes, and forms. They contribute. They do the work that most of us refuse to do. They pick produce in agriculture. They take care of our children and our seniors. You know, these are the kinds of, they wash dishes, they do deliveries. These are the kind of jobs that immigrants do, and they're doing a good job at it. And they're also paying taxes. When they buy goods and services, they're paying taxes, so they're contributing to the economy far more than they're taking out.
And there is a narrative that undocumented immigrants are receiving a lot of federal services. But I've often wondered I've often wondered how you apply for federal services without documentation.
Without documentation. So, you know, this is just another shell game by the administration trying to portray immigrants as bloodthirsty criminals, as he said, or people that are leeching on to government for assistance. When it's far the opposite. They're hardworking people that are doing jobs, performing work that most Americans do not want to perform. They're contributing to our country, and they've been bringing the most important economic development program this country has ever known, which is what? Immigration.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much for joining us,
so
and
much.
good luck with this.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to pass it back to Zinkley now, who is joined by another freshman who has just joined this new Congress.
That's right. I am joined with a congressman from New Jersey, freshman. Do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Of course. I'm Tom Malinowski, freshman congressman from the 7th District in New Jersey.
Now, I just want to lead by asking you, what was your campaign slogan? We were talking about it a little earlier.
Really? We're going to do this?
I think we should.
Well, obviously it was Malinowski for the house key.
Oh, wow. Catchy. And clearly it worked.
It worked. Bad dad jokes can win an election anywhere in this country anytime.
So it seems. And you've had a very eventful introduction to Congress. What are your thoughts about the shutdown?
Yes, it was drama and crisis from the beginning. This was the stupidest crisis in American history. And it was not about the things that the president said it was about. It was not about border security. It was not about building a wall. It was about whether it is right or wrong for anybody, the president or the Congress, to shut down the United States government, to put 800,000 people out of work or to force them to work without pay because you can't force your will. on the other branch through the democratic process. That's why we, the Democrats in the House of Representatives, said no to that strategy. We're not going to negotiate with a gun to our heads. And I'm so glad that we broke it. And now we have a chance to actually talk about those issues, but through the democratic process, and have a compromise, have a negotiation, do something reasonable.
And do you think we'll go back into another government shutdown?
Absolutely not, no. I think that the president's Republican supporters, I'm not sure if they're really supporters, they fear him more than they support him, but they do not want to go back to the pain and the suffering and the embarrassment of the United States government shutting down. They've told Trump in the White House there's no going back. So that means it's up to us, House, Senate, Republicans, Democrats, to negotiate something reasonable now that we can talk about border security and immigration in an adult way. And, you know, we're all for securing the border. That is a fundamental duty of the government. But we want to do it in an effective way. You know, show me a wall, I'll show you a ladder that can get over it. And so we all know that's not the right way. But through technology, through people who are monitoring the border, we can do it right. And I hope we also have a conversation about getting us back to being a country of immigrants again, a country that admits refugees who are coming from places of conflict and oppression. I was an immigrant who came here from a communist country, Poland, when I was 6 years old. Our country was built by people who came here from places like that to build a better life for themselves here. We have to get back to being that country.
And you're no stranger to foreign relations. Can you talk to us about your background?
My job before I did this crazy thing was I was at the State Department. I was our Assistant Secretary of State for Human Rights and Democracy. My job was to stand up to dictators in countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia and China and Burma, getting people out of prison, standing up for women's rights, trying to figure out what to do about horrible humanitarian crises like Syria and Iraq, where innocent people are subject to atrocities. What should America do in those situations? And one reason I ran for Congress was a lot of those values that we were fighting for around the world are under attack here at home. So I felt I wanted to do something for my country. But once we settle things here and get back to decency and truth and democracy in our own country, I do believe that we Americans, we need to be leaders in the world.
And my last question for you, we have a very young audience, so what is kind of the biggest issue you think millennials should be aware of and sensitive to?
Well, I'll tell you what they say I should be aware of, and that is the role of corruption and money in our politics. Look, there's a reason why our government doesn't do things that the American people want. There's a reason why we didn't get a public option in Obamacare. There's a reason why we can't seem to pass any sensible gun legislation, even though the vast majority of the American people, even the majority of gun owners, want us to. There's a reason why the Congress passed that terrible tax bill last year, which gave all the breaks to people at the very top. It's because members of Congress too often answer to the people writing the checks, big checks, sometimes dark money checks that we don't even know who's writing the check. So our first bill, the Democrats introduced in the House of Representatives, H.R. 1, tries to do something about that, to get dark money and foreign money, big money, out of our elections, out of our politics, so we can return government to the people.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, I just spoke with a freshman congressman from New Jersey, and now we're going to go back to Alan for the next.
Well, I've been told that we actually have a very special guest joining us. She is on her way into the building. A very special guest that we would address as Madam Speaker.
Yes.
We spoke with her not long before the election, and this will be our first time speaking with her since she has regained the title of Madam Speaker.
Absolutely, and there's been not a shortage of news and events surrounding her work, so there's a lot to talk about.
Yes, yes, and I see she has just entered the room, and she'll be coming down to us. And shall we put her between us?
Sure, that sounds great.
I think that sounds good. And she is coming this way. Ladies and gentlemen at home, if you are waiting and watching to see the woman of the hour, the most powerful woman in America, one of the most powerful people in the world, you are about to see her. She is coming our way. third in line to the succession of the presidency, we have the woman who became the first woman Speaker of the House, and she is walking up right now. She is coming. We are so excited to have her join us.
Absolutely.
Madam Speaker, thank you so much for joining us. I'm just going to step so that she doesn't.
Yeah,
just going to step so that we don't trip.
Thank you for joining us.
Madam Speaker, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure to be here.
We spoke with you a few months ago when we didn't know if Democrats would take the House. We didn't know whom they might make Speaker when they did. Talk to us about the State of the Union, since somebody else is not giving a State of the Union address tonight.
Well, first of all, I always knew that we would win. We've had a big victory with a great class. This class of freshmen is spectacular. We net gained 40 seats. Just think we would have done if it had not been a gerrymandered, voter-suppressed arena that we were in. But we're very proud of the accomplishment that we did, winning the majority, the majority, the majority. That's, you have to say it 3 times. And the unfortunate state of the union is that although we survived the threat of a shutdown for now, the threat of a shutdown is very scary to workers, so we have to make sure that that does not happen.
And as you just mentioned, we experienced the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. Is it going to happen again?
It can't. I mean, I think one of the messages that we have with our working with the groups, the outside groups, is we have to make sure people understand this can't happen. 800,000 families not getting a paycheck. My favorite current story, because they're all great stories of families, but yesterday I went to give out food at the at Chef Andreas's place, and I was with a woman while we were giving food out and the rest, and after I left her, they told me that she was going into hospice on Friday of this week. This was Monday, but she wanted to spend her last days helping other people, saying thank you to our federal workers for what they do for our country. Imagine the empathy of that woman. Imagine the absence of empathy in certain quarters in Washington, D.C.
And we're now hearing that this shutdown may have cost the economy as much as $11 billion.
Yeah, well, the fact is that shutdowns do cost the economy money. But what we're concerned about is the cost to individual families, to the communities they live in, but losing their purchasing power, to the services that are not rendered to the American people by the federal employees, and the cost to the economy as well. So hopefully this as an option of leverage for the president is taken off the table. We cannot afford this. President using a shutdown as a leverage to keep a campaign applause line is just not right.
And other presidents have had signature items. Barack Obama wanted to get his health care plan passed.
And he did.
We've had many presidents with big policy items, but they've managed to get them passed without shutting down the government. Is that a legitimate way to make something like this happen?
No, it's not a legitimate way. And most presidents have, by and large, not used it as a tactic. Sometimes it has an inevitability where the Congress will just not pass a bill. But for a president to initiate such a thing and say, I can't open up government because if I open up government, I will lose my leverage in this debate on the wall. It's just stunning. In fact, it's stunning because there are better ways to protect our border than building a wall. As we protect our border, and we're committed to doing that, we also have to protect our values, who we are as a country and how we respect people as we go forward. So this is a loser idea in so many respects, and the fact that he would exploit this financial security of 800,000 families just tells you how out of balance his values are.
Thank you. And what is your message to him? You've obviously been in much communication, but now that we're in this in-between period, what do you have to say?
Well, I'm just saying, let's find our common ground. Let's get the job done. We all want to secure our border, so let's protect it in a way that truly works, is cost effective, and does not undermine who we are as a country. So I just say to him, you're the president, we respect the office you hold, now let us find our common ground.
Is there anything the president could offer, such as passage of a DREAM Act, that could make it worthwhile to spend money on a wall?
Well, the fact is that a wall is not a productive use of money. So, of course, we will do almost anything to protect the DREAM Act, which is not what the president's talking about. He's talking about DACA, which is important, but it's half the number of people as are in a DREAM Act. You know, it's under 1 million. Dreamers are more like 1.8 million. And we want to protect their parents, and we want to protect temporary protective status as well as a protection for people. So. But you have to look at is, what is he proposing? Is it cost effective? What is the cost-benefit ratio of it? And where is this money coming from? And what is the opportunity lost for using that money for something better? So we don't like the wall for what it stands for, blocking people. We don't like the wall for what it costs and what it takes money away from. And we think we can take this all to a better place. And by the way, the Dreamers were protected by President Obama. He took the protection away, and then he says, I'll give it back to you if you give me a wall. Not a good deal.
And wrapping up, beyond the economic impact, can you talk to us about the legacy the shutdown leaves on American democracy and the Trump administration?
Well, I thank you for that question, because a shutdown is really a manifestation, another manifestation of some ultra-conservatives who are engineering, shrinking the government. They don't believe in governance. They don't believe in governance in terms of health care. They don't believe in governance in many aspects. Protecting the environment, Lord knows. The only governance they seem to believe in is worrying about a woman's right to choose or LGBT marriage equalities. They're big on that kind of government. But nonetheless, there has been for a long time an attempt on their part to reduce the size of government. In doing a shutdown, they want to demonstrate to the people, oh, see, you can live without this. Well, this is a 25% shutdown. This is not a 100% shutdown. So they're trying to make it like it hardly had any effect in your life. But it has an effect in the life of America. So the legacy, hopefully, that is positive from this is, let's not do this again. This is not playing fair. It's not the right thing to do for our country. It hurts families. And you know what? It hurts veterans. A third of our workforce, federal workforce, are veterans. Many of them in the defense area, but many of them in the non-defense area as well. And when you hurt veterans, when you impact their financial security, when you impact their credit rating, you can jeopardize their security clearance, therefore jeopardizing their ability to perform the job that they're in, that they love. And it's just wrong. So in addition to just hurting everyone, for people who profess to care about our veterans, this is a very, very bad idea. So again, in terms of individual families, communities, services to the public, our economy in general, our veterans in particular, this is not a good way to go.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing what you work out.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, well, we have more members of Congress joining us, and Zincle, I think we have a very familiar face coming this way.
Indeed.
I think someone is about to come and reclaim her time. I'm going to let you take this interview.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Right.
And, yes, she's going to be over here in just a moment, but now she's stopping to take a picture with the secretary, with the speaker.
Speaker, yes.
All right.
So now we're going to be speaking with Congresswoman Maxine Waters.
She has organized this whole event. This is the second year that it has taken place, and it is it's kind of a testament to the excitement that she has sparked in among younger voters. I think we have. I think she's joining us right now.
Hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
We're great. Thank you for hosting this event.
Oh, this is wonderful, and thank you for being here.
Of course.
I'm just so excited about it.
So this is the second
second
Millennial Media Row.
That's right.
Last year it happened, and we're going to be looking here. Last year it happened after the State of the Union. That's not happening right now, but why did you choose to do it anyway?
Well, we chose to do it anyway because we think it's just very important for alternative media to come in this Capitol and our members learn who they are and how they've got to interact with them, because the messages that they're getting are not always the messages that young people would like to get out into the public. So we thought it was very important, and even though it got all mixed up with the shutdown and all of that, we still wanted you here, and it's working fine.
And what message do you have regarding the shutdown, the longest in U.S. history?
Well, first of all, we must never let it happen again, and we must not allow this president to intimidate, to in any way make us believe that he's going to do it again. Even though he said that after, we opened government back up, but I guarantee you, we will not allow it to happen again.
What if he insists on a border wall? What do you say?
If he insists on what?
A border wall.
No. We're not going to support a border wall. We know that he wants $5.7 or $5.9 billion in order to put up a wall that really does not amount to border security. We're saying to him, this is how you do border security with the new technology, with drones, with having more justices down there making decisions about whether or not families qualify to get in the country. We're talking about real border security, and following that, we've got to talk about real immigration reform. It's not working the way it should.
And you mentioned this event is so that media can meet the new members of
That's
Congress.
right. That's
How
right.
do you feel about the most diverse Congress ever?
I love it. And I'm so looking forward to the interactions when we do our hearings and some of our new members get a chance to raise questions of the President's cabinet and secretaries and others that are running agencies and departments that they think are not doing a great job. They can ask them anything they want to. And they can also tell them what they care about and what they would like to see done. And they can also work to put that in legislation.
And what change do you anticipate happening in terms of legislation?
Well, I think number one that I'm going to concentrate on housing. We have a housing crisis in this country. I have a bill for $13.9 billion that we're going to fight very hard to make sure we get monies out to the cities and counties in order to get people off the street. I'm going to work real hard. I think we're all going to work real hard on that. All the Democrats I know are going to work very hard on that. But in addition to that, I created a new subcommittee on diversity. And this subcommittee is going to look at the financial services community and industry, period. All the banks, all of the feds and the Treasury, everything. And we're going to get information about what the makeup of that particular entity is and whether or not they have African Americans and Latinos and Asians and whites and whether or not there's real diversity. And if not, we're going to point it out and we're going to recommend to them changes. And if those changes don't take place, we have the power, now that we're in control in the House, to do some things, working with that agency through legislation in cooperation with the Senate to try and make something happen. People worry about, well, maybe if you get good bills, the president won't sign them. Maybe he won't. But we're just getting ready for 2020.
Are you hopeful?
Am I hopeful? We're going to change the presidency. If this president runs, he's not going to win. A Democrat is going to win. We can see what the polls are saying now, how people who voted for him even are saying they would not vote for him now. We're seeing that even, with the support that he's had for so long that seemed to stick with him is beginning to diminish, is going down. But we're very, very not only hopeful, but we're very ambitious about doing the election, supporting the right candidates, and making sure that we take back the White House.
And do you believe the president will make it to the election given all the investigations circulating him right now?
I hope not. He should have been impeached a long time ago. It's been too long. I mean, we know enough about him. He has basically obstructed justice right before our very eyes. We know enough to know that there's been collusion with Russia and the oligarchs. And I don't know what the hesitancy is, except that people don't easily get into something like impeachment, particularly if they don't quite understand how it all works. And so a lot of education is going on. But yeah, he should have been gone a long time ago.
And do you have any message for our young audience watching?
Yes, First of all, I want to thank our young audience and our millennials for helping to raise the level of discussion about fairness and justice in this country. And what's happening to them, have gone to college, have worked hard, can't get a loan, can't buy a house, can't look forward to having a family and children anytime in their young years, the way things are going because the economy is not working for them. They are the ones who have raised this message and got us focused on it. And I believe that the input that they're giving is going to help us create the change.
Well, thank you so much for
You're
your
welcome.
time.
Thank you.
Wonderful speaking with
Thank
you.
you.
Again, of course, this was Representative Maxine Waters.
Okay, who's next? You got somebody?
Here with Congressman Andy Kim, who is part of this exciting young new wave of members of Congress. Now, we profiled you in a video at a time when people were saying that your seat was a safe Republican seat.
That's right. I mean, my seat, I ran for the New Jersey 3rd Congressional District, and this was a seat held by an incumbent who won the previous election by 20 points. And had put in millions of dollars of his own money into campaigning. So people told me that there's no way that I'll be able to win this seat. There's no way that a Korean American can win in a district that's predominantly white. No way that someone my age and can be able to mobilize this type of community. But I'm really proud of the campaign we put together, one of integrity, and be able to win this thing.
Now, if a young dad can run for Congress and win, can our viewers who want to get involved in their communities, are there future members of Congress that ought to be able to decide, I should get involved, I should consider running for office, whether it's Congress or some other position?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is all about just trying to help people understand how to engage their democracy, not just on Election Day, but every day. I always said on the campaign that this energy that we saw out there, it can't just be about 2018 or 2020. It just needs to become that new baseline of civic engagement in our country now and forever. I never thought that I'd run for Congress, but I also never thought that we'd be in this kind of situation as a country, and we got to do everything we can to step up.
Now, you ran, one of your key issues was health care, and you had a very personal reason for wanting to fight for health care. Can you talk a bit about that?
Absolutely. Well, all of this comes down to it being personal. I always say it wasn't politics, it's personal. For me, as a father of 2 baby boys, and my youngest son, actually just before I jumped into this race, was still inside the womb and having real health problems. He was dangerously underweight and at real risk. And the doctors are telling us that they don't know what's going to happen. And going through that experience and watching this healthcare debate simultaneously in Congress, where they're talking about taking away healthcare from people with pre-existing conditions. My father's a polio survivor. My baby boy, who thankfully was born at a healthy weight and able to move forward. But that kind of scare is something that so many people in this country understand. And we live in a time when 40% of Americans can't handle a $400 emergency, and that's a fundamental problem in our nation.
Well, Congressman, congratulations on your victory, and I hope that we'll be seeing a lot more of you on NowThis, and thank you so much for speaking with us tonight.
Well, thank you so much.
We're about to go.
And we'll pass it back to Zinkley.
Well, I'm joined now by Congressman Blumenauer. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
So can you tell our viewers who may not know, who do you represent?
I represent mostly the city of Portland, Portlandia as shorthand. It's a great part of the Pacific Northwest.
So can you talk to us about your pin to start?
Well, part of what I have done in Congress is organize a bike caucus. We're officially bike partisan, support burning calories instead of fossil fuel. It's the most efficient form of urban transportation ever designed. I used to be in Portland city government and started a bicycle program there. It really helps change the urban landscape. It promotes health, as I say, calories instead of fossil fuel, and it's fun.
And beyond bikes, you also have a comic book, right? Can you talk to us about that?
Well, yes. We've been working for several years on a food and farm policy. We spend too much on the wrong people to grow the wrong food, the wrong way, in the wrong places. We lavish support on big industrial agriculture production and meat production, and we shortchange farmers and ranchers that are family-oriented, beginning farmers and ranchers, minority farmers. And so we've created an alternative farm bill, and I even put it in the form of a comic book that's simple enough that even members of Congress can understand. The Farm Bill, it just flies under the radar screen. People don't pay attention to the hundreds of billions of dollars that are spent and really shortchange most communities. And frankly, we waste 1,200 calories a day. We have food deserts. It's hard for beginning farmers. So we need to have a different policy that promotes agriculture for people.
And you've been serving for
23 years.
So can you talk to us a bit about your policies around cannabis?
Well, I've been working actually even before I came to Congress. I was a child legislator when Oregon was the first state to decriminalize marijuana. I've been working on it for decades. But more recently, the efforts have really ramped up. We have formed a bipartisan cannabis caucus. I've been campaigning around the country in the states. Now, 47 states have some form of cannabis that is legal. Almost a quarter of the public have legal access to adult use, and medical marijuana is overwhelmingly supported. The people drove this. Congress needs to get in step. We have work that we need to do with restorative justice. Our failed policy of prohibition has ruined 1 million lives of young African American men. It's fueled the prison industrial complex, and it's denied people medicine that would make a difference. You know, it's interesting, in states that have medical marijuana, there are fewer opioid deaths. So this is an issue whose time has come. It's been driven at the grassroots level by activists and citizens at the ballot box, and I think the tide is turning now where Congress may actually get on board.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much for breaking down all of those policies and proposals for us.
Well, we're happy to do that, and people can contact my office and we can give them a matrix of all the legislation and a path forward so that we can make a difference in this Congress. If we do our job right, this might be the Congress that legalizes adult use and makes more accessible medical marijuana.
Thank you,
You bet.
Thank you so much. And now we're going to toss to Alan.
And I'm here with Chairman Scott
Thank you.
of the Education and Labor Committee. Chairman, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
Now, I know that one of the issues that weighs most heavily on most people I know, and I suspect most of our viewers, is the high cost of college. A lot of our viewers are scared of how they will pay for college when they go. A lot of our viewers are long out of college and still seeing no end to their debt. How do we make college more affordable?
Well, there are a lot of things you can do. First of all, encourage states to put more money into higher education. Several decades ago, the cost of a state college, 2/3 of that was paid for by the state. Now, on average, it's less than 1/3. That doubles the cost of the student before you get to inflation. Pell Grants haven't come anywhere close to closing that gap, and a lot of students are ending up with crushing student debt. We have to make sure that we help students pay off those loans. There was a bill introduced by the Republicans last year that would have actually cut student aid by $15 billion and made student loans harder to pay off. We're going to look forward to making student loans easier to pay off, public service loan forgiveness, income-based repayments to make it easier for students to pay off those loans. And hopefully they won't have as much of a loan to begin with because states are putting up more money. But that's going to be one of the areas. Increasing Pell Grants will be another area of concern by increasing student aid. We're going to make sure that the education you get is worthwhile by cracking down on accreditors that are accrediting colleges that are not providing a decent education. We find this is a problem, particularly in the for-profit sector, where some of the credentials are so weak that people have paid a lot of money for the education, and when they get their credential, they go out to get a job and find they're making less than they were when they went there to begin with and have a crushing student debt to pay. So there are a lot of things we can do to make college more affordable and to make student loans easier to pay off.
And you mentioned income-based payments. That's something I think a lot of people might not know what that means, but it's a very interesting idea. Can you just explain that a little bit?
Well, the present law allows you to pay, instead of paying a set amount, pay a percentage of your income, and after 15 years, whatever's left is discharged. Last year, the Republicans would allow that to continue without the benefit of a discharge at the end of 15 years. We would make sure that continues and is made more generous. Also, there's public service loan forgiveness. If you work in a public service job, military, teaching in certain areas, working for the government, legal aid programs for lawyers, things like that, after 10 years, your loan is forgiven. Those kinds of programs make student loans much easier to pay off. We're going to make sure that they're continued and expanded.
And that's good for the student because the loan goes away, but it's also good for the community because you have created an incentive for people to do public service.
And some with crushing student loan debt can't afford to be in public service because they have such a big student debt. That also adversely affects their ability to buy houses, to buy cars, and when most of your money is going to the student loan, that crushing debt is very detrimental, and we need to do something about it, and that's what we're going to be focused on doing.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much. I really appreciate your taking the time to talk with us. It sounds like there is a lot of work to be done and a real difference between the parties, and I thank you for sharing those.
We've got a lot of work to do. Raising the minimum wage will be another thing that we can do to help, and we're going to be working on that too.
Well, that is good to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're going to pass it back to Zinclair.
Well, we are here with Representative Dean. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So can you tell our viewers what issues are of interest and focus for you?
There are so many, but I will highlight one that I highlight all the time, and that's gun violence. Every year in this country, 2 years ago it was 33,000 people died of gun violence. I don't know if you saw this, but last year it was actually 40,000 people. We had a terrible spike in gun violence in this country in the last 12 months. 40,000 people died of gun violence, more than half to suicide, and another 80,000 people are literally wounded, caught in the crossfire. So this is just a monstrous problem that we must do something about. Government must pass legislation to save lives.
And government has been at a bit of a standstill. Can you talk to us about your thoughts around the longest government shutdown in U.S. history?
Well, it was very strange to be sworn in, and the very first day I was sworn in, we were in shutdown. And we were immediately voting. The Democratic majority in the House passed legislation after legislation to open up government. To me, it was absolutely a shameful episode. It caused immeasurable harm to federal workers, to their families. I met with many of them who said their children were afraid, that they had overheard mommy and daddy, worried about paying the bills, worried about going to work as an air traffic controller and not being paid. But the ripple effect in this economy, I think it was just a shameful episode. May it never, ever happen again. We must not govern by tantrum because we will then have to live by that.
And the question I've been asking is, of course, we know the deadline is February 15th. It could happen again. What would you all be willing to compromise?
I think we've always talked about border security, and we've always funded border security, so I don't think it actually is going to require compromise. What we won't do is go for a vanity wall that will not make anybody safer, and in fact will really send up a signal that is demeaning. We are for smart border security. You know, another issue I care an awful lot about is our opioid epidemic. Last year, 72,000 people died of overdose. Those drugs, many of those drugs, are coming in not across a desert or across our southern border, but through ports of entry. What we need to do is fund really smart technology that will discover those drugs embedded in cargo. So I think that's where we're going to find common ground, which is we want border security, smart border security, along with everything else that government has to do to keep us safe.
And you mentioned this was kind of an odd circumstance to be sworn in under, but you were also known as part of a Fab Four. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, it was exciting. In Pennsylvania, I don't know if you know this, Pennsylvania, before the election of 2018, we had no women serving in Congress. The last woman was Allison Schwartz, my friend and mentor, but that was 4 years earlier. So 4 of us were running. We called ourselves the Fab Four. We did some joint events under the theory that a rising tide lifts all boats, and women helping women worked. And people loved it. So Chrissy Houlihan, Mary Gay Scanlon, Susan Wild, and I ran, and we all won. And so now the Pennsylvania delegation looks a whole lot different.
And to wrap up, what would you say to folks who may be considering, women who may be considering running?
Run. That's what I say. Absolutely. Get involved. Meet up with folks. Go to town halls. Meet candidates. Work on a campaign. Look for a mentor. It's just get involved. This is a place for everybody, and most especially we have to have more women and greater diversity. That's how we'll actually solve problems in a much more productive way.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now I'll hand it back to Alan for our next guest.
And I'm here with Congressman Takano, who is another history maker. Tell us about the history that you made this year.
Well, I'm the first openly gay person of color to serve as a chairman of a full standing committee in the Congress. I'm now the chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee.
And what does the Veterans Affairs Committee do?
We oversee all the veterans benefits, veterans health care, the GI Bill, the Department of the Veterans Department of the federal government. It's the second largest federal department after the Department of Defense in terms of the number of employees and amount of money it spends.
Now, speaking of both the Department of Defense and LGBTQ rights, we've had a ruling from the Supreme Court about the ability
which upheld the ability of the Trump administration to continue its ban on trans members of the military, and it's not a final ruling. It's while the suit is in process, the justices upheld the administration's right to do that. This is a horrific step backwards in terms of making sure that all members of the military who have something to offer and serve our country in uniform, they shouldn't be facing this sort of discrimination. And it's the sort of thing that it's happening in this administration, and it's truly abhorrent.
And I think that for a number of years it seemed like so much progress was being made on LGBTQ rights, and that seems to be largely in peril at the moment.
Very much imperiled. We made a huge step forward in 2010. The lame duck Congress back then, when Nancy Pelosi was still the Speaker, they were able to push through an overturning of the ban of LGBTQ service members to lift Don't Ask, Don't Tell, to basically repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. One of my challenges as the new chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee is to ask the question, what will the VA need to be in the year 2030 to really serve its ever more diverse population of veterans? We're going to have more women as veterans. Certainly we have a lot more LGBTQ veterans. We know at least, well, for now, LGBE, but not the T, because the trans have now been effectively banned. But we're going to have veterans that are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans, and queer, who need the services of the VA. How will the VA serve these veterans in the future? How will they serve women veterans, minority veterans? There's going to be increasingly more diverse veteran population according to ethnicity.
And how are you going to fight to make sure that all veterans are protected?
Well, the big thing that we need to do, and I might add also that this Congress that I'm a part of is it is the gayest Congress in history that we know of, because who knows who were hiding out in years previous. But we have 10, between the Senate and the House, 10 members of Congress that identify as LGBTQ, 8 in the House of Representatives. And that's part of being the most diverse caucus in history. We've elected unprecedented numbers of women to Congress, and that we've elected unprecedented numbers of LGBTQ members, and I say that we know of. So we have 8 members of the House. I was, at one point, the only LGBTQ member of Congress who was a person of color, but I'm not so lonely anymore because Cheri Davids of Kansas identifies as lesbian, and she is a Native American woman. And so, we formed the, I don't know what you call this caucus, the LGBTQ person of color caucus, but that's kind of too long, and I got to figure out a way to make it a more efficient name. But maybe your viewers can help. What do we call ourselves? So.
Crowdsourcing is often a good way to come up with a good name for a thing.
Yeah, and I look forward to the NowThis, Facebook, video.
Well, there are comments scrolling right now. I can't see them, but I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are some helpful suggestions.
I'm sure there are. But getting back to your question about veterans, we need to protect not only veterans but all LGBTQ people in this country once and finally for all. We need to pass the Equality Act, which is a comprehensive LGBTQ civil rights bill, which goes back and changes and amends for the better the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Fair Housing Act. We have LGBTQ elders that can be discriminated in housing, LGBTQ people that can be discriminated in housing, period. In many states, it is still possible to be fired just for who you are. And that means we need to pass, the Equality Act in Congress to just make LGBTQ people equal before the law once and for all. This is also going to be helpful in terms of making it clear that trans people cannot be, dismissed from the military service just because of who they are. And I just want to say that Jesse Smollett's attack, the attack on Jesse Smollett, an LGBTQ actor on the show Empire, underscores the need to, put the LGBTQ equality and dignity on the table. That we still see these horrendous attacks happening today, but we have this development that we've also elected the most diverse Congress in history, including the gayest Congress in history. And I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we change the climate, the social and political climate of our country and the world. So that attacks on Jesse Smollett's don't happen. I shudder to think about one of my, I wouldn't call him colleagues, but an LGBTQ member of Congress in the country of Brazil, retired or resigned in fear of his life because of the climate created by the new incoming president, Bolsonaro, who was embraced by Secretary of State Pompeo, National Security Advisor, I'm blanking on his name at the moment. He's a nefarious person, but they both embrace this leader who has created a very, very hostile environment, such that an LGBTQ member of Congress has left office because he fears for his life. So this is a national problem for us, a national challenge for us, and I do put some blame on the leadership in this country because they're setting a bad example and they're embracing people who are doing terrible things to LGBTQ people across the country, around the world.
So if we want to change that, people need to call their senators and their member of Congress and say that it's time to pass the Equality Act, which is an easy name to remember for an act.
And just know that nearly every member of the Democratic caucus in the House is a co-sponsor of this bill. And we have the votes to pass it. We are going to pass it. And we need LGBTQ people and their allies across the country to not just call members of the House, and just know they're most likely the Democratic members of the House are already supporting the bill, and we're going to pass it in the House after it goes through regular order here. But we need to work on the Senate, and we need to send a message to President Trump that he needs to sign the bill.
Okay. Well, thank you, Congressman, so much.
Thank you.
And congratulations on your position.
Bye-bye. All right.
Congresswoman, I'm so sorry.
Tonko, thank you so much for being with us.
Zincle, my pleasure to join you on Now This. I think it's awesome.
Yes, now this, now that.
Thank you for the good job you're doing.
Thank you. Well, can you tell our viewers who you represent and how long?
Sure. I'm Paul Tonko, and I represent New York's 20th Congressional District, which encompasses the capital region of upstate New York and the Mohawk Valley. I've been in that role for the last 5 terms here in the House, starting my 11th year on the Hill here in Washington, after about 25 years in the State Assembly in New York, and 8+ years at my county level of government. So I got to see the various levels of government working in their capacity, and that experience, I hope, serves people well. And I'm an engineer involved in politics, so that's somewhat of a unique segue into a political policy arena.
Yes, very eclectic. And you've served for over a decade. Have you ever seen anything like the shutdown we just had?
No, it was deplorable. It certainly was avoidable. There was no reason to hold hostage 800,000 federal workers and the many federal programs upon which many people depend or that serve us well, from the farming community to business community to human services that range from hunger programs over to children's programs to veterans services. So it really was an awful impact. I'm told now the price tag was $11 billion, $3 billion of which will never be recovered. So it really was a harshness, but most importantly, the impact on human life, on the dignity of life was profound. I heard many, many stories, and I shared them with my colleagues, and we shared them on the floor.
Were there any that stuck out to you in particular?
Well, yeah, there were folks who were saving money for their son's surgery, which is very critical to him, and there's a co-payment, and they were saving dollars for that. There were people who had just signed for a mortgage. The very next day, the shutdown occurred. There were people whose story was shared with me, who actually took their toddler, their newborn, and had transferred her over to her grandparents states away, simply because of the impact of not being able to afford diapers and formula. So it was a really hurtful thing for so many people. And I had asked rhetorically, what if one of us had a paycheck removed not only once but twice without any advance notice? It's a very difficult thing by which to respond, and it's a very harsh thing. When you had no role in that border security debate. Holding workers hostage was simply foolish.
And while the government was at a standstill, you obviously have a number of policies and proposals you'd like to move forward.
Right.
Talk to us about climate and the environment.
Sure. I was just named chairman of the newly named Environment and Climate Change Subcommittee, and I've been ranking member on the Environment Subcommittee for the past several sessions, and now enjoy the role of serving as chair. And what we want to tackle heavily is the impact of climate change and developing short-term and medium and long-term solutions. In fact, our first hearing will be held on February 6th, and that one will focus on the cost of inaction.
Oh, wow.
A number of people who deny climate change or who may embrace it but are concerned about the cost of responding to that environmental damage will utilize that as a reason not to address it. But what we want to highlight is there's a cost of inaction. We look at the many issues out there, the anecdotes of Mother Nature wreaking damage through storms, through ice storms, flooding, wildfires, extreme drought, extreme cold, whatever the situation might be. It's about the extremes. People will want to point to, well, the very wicked cold gripping the nation this winter, and they're saying, that denies and dispels the whole concept of climate change. No, it's about the extremes: extreme cold, extreme heat, extreme drought, extreme flooding. So we need to go forward and determine what that price tag is so that we can raise that consciousness and utilize the savings that we can produce and invest them in a response to climate change. Now, our first agenda will be to harvest some of that low-hanging fruit that is available that will make a difference with carbon pollution reduction.
And you said that's February 6th is when
February 6th. We'll be looking at items like energy efficiency as we move forward, We'll look at weatherization, grid modernization, so we can utilize all of the renewable power that will be produced. We have shelf-ready technology that can enable us to absorb all of that capacity of renewables that will be produced. And then issues like infrastructure, greening up our infrastructure response that would include items like fueling stations, charging stations for the electrification of the transportation sector, which is a big contributor to carbon pollution along with the power sector.
Well, thank you so much for breaking that down for us.
It is my pleasure to be with you. And, there's a lot of work to be done. And we look forward to taking that passion brought by this freshman class and their determination to resolve this carbon pollution effort, the climate change issue, taking their expertise, hearing what they've done at home in their activism, and fusing it all with sound policy that is science-based, evidence-based. As an engineer here developing policy, it's a great opportunity to chair the Subcommittee on Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you so much, Congressman Tonko.
My best to you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And now we'll turn it over to Alan.
Thank you. I am here with Congresswoman Susan Wild. Now, we met last spring at a candidate forum in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
We did.
And at that point, I think a lot of people would have said that your district was a very solidly red district.
I don't know if they would have said it was solidly red, but it was definitely a swing district. 50-50 registration pretty much, with a lot of independents thrown in. Of course, my district changed midstream because of Pennsylvania's redistricting. I was originally running in a very red district, and then it switched to much more of a swing district.
Now, explain that redistricting, because
Yes.
I think the way your district used to look, I think, would shock a lot of viewers.
So my old district, well, first of all, Allentown, where you were, is part of the Lehigh Valley. So it's Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton. And that is really a contiguous unit that should never be split up for political reasons. It's an economic unit, essentially. People commute from one end to the other. And the old district, which Charlie Dent represented, had only the westernmost part of the Lehigh Valley, and then it stretched all the way out to Harrisburg, out towards Harrisburg, and included areas that really had nothing in common with the Lehigh Valley. So redistricting actually put the entire Lehigh Valley back together, which makes a lot of sense. And it should be that way. I also, as a result of redistricting, picked up Stroudsburg and Lower Monroe County, which used to be Matt Cartwright's district, and Easton as well, which was not part of Charlie's. And it just makes sense because it really is, for all intents and purposes, one region.
And also, before the election, am I correct in recalling that there were no women in Pennsylvania's delegation at all?
You are absolutely correct. So we went from no women at all among the 18-member congressional delegation in Pennsylvania to 4 women. I'm one of 4. And we're very excited. It was history-making or herstory-making. And, we're all working very hard together now.
And is Congress what you expected it to be in your first weeks here?
It is what I expected it to be and much more. I'm actually very gratified by my experience here. I was afraid that it would be a matter of freshman members coming in and essentially being ignored for a period of time until you proved your chops. But it's not like that at all. I have found that leadership and senior members are not only very welcoming and want to help a lot, but they also are very open to new ideas, and they want to hear from us. And of course, you probably know a lot about this freshman class. It is the youngest, most diverse freshman class ever. And I don't think there's a single shrinking violet in the entire group. And I really give a lot of credit to the leadership that they are so interested in hearing from us.
Well, we are excited to see what you're going to do, and I hope that you keep coming back to NowThis and telling us what you do.
I absolutely would love to. I'm a fan of your programs, and I will be. I would be happy to do that.
Well, Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And I'll throw it back now to Zinkley, who is stepped aside for just a moment, and we are admiring this fine graphic which highlights that this is the Millennial Media Row. This is the second year that Congresswoman Maxine Waters has hosted this event, this Democratic House Party in the House, and we are happy to be back again for it. I'll tell you, this event was connected to the State of the Union, and we didn't know if it was going to happen because we didn't know if the State of the Union was going to happen. But I think that Congresswoman Waters wanted to send a message that Democrats aren't necessarily going to let the president set the agenda for what's going to happen. So we are here in the U.S. Capitol, just near the end of we are okay. I've just learned that Zincle is back in place, and I'm going to throw it back to her.
Hello, I am here with NowThis. Thanks for being with us.
Great to be with you today.
And you've been serving for how long exactly?
Well, this is my first full day serving in Congress, not in the shutdown. So, I've been here since January 3rd, elected last November.
And what has it been like to begin serving in Congress during the longest government shutdown in history?
Well, it's been an amazing experience, but I think reality has set in for many of us that we're hoping to come and shake things up and change things right away. The reality of Washington-style politics has set in. And so I think we've got to look for ways to make sure that we end shutdown politics, that we never get in a situation again where politicians are using 800,000 federal workers as political leverage or are playing with very critical government services. We're here to do a job. And I think we need to be responsible about pushing politics aside, taking votes. Let's figure out where we agree and disagree, and let's take some votes and make some things happen. That's what the people are expecting.
And your freshman class made some serious history in many ways, and you as well. Can you talk to our viewers about that?
Yeah, we have the most diverse freshman class in history. We're 10 years younger than Congress is on average. We have more women, more people of color, more LGBTQ Americans than ever before. We have 8 out members of Congress right now. I'm part of that group. And so we're really hoping that by having everyone enjoying a seat at the table, by representing each and every American, by making sure that everyone's voice is heard here in the halls of Congress, that we can ensure that there's no discrimination under the law. So we're pushing the Equality Act, which would ban discrimination in housing, in employment, in public accommodations, regardless of your sexual orientation or your gender identity. Some states have taken on and passed that law. We need to make sure that regardless of your zip code in America, that you can't be discriminated against under the law.
And if our viewers want to learn more about that or get involved, what should they and could they do?
Well, there are many groups that are involved in the fight for this, including the business community, including groups like the Human Rights Campaign. And so they're helping to pull together a coalition of folks that I think is going to give us the grassroots support we need to pass this out of the House. This has never passed the House before, but we have hundreds of co-sponsors on the legislation that understand that it's not the American way to discriminate against people, and that as a nation, we've got to look for ways to make sure that everyone is included, that everyone is empowered, because we all succeed when that's the result.
And you mentioned, so there are 8 open congressmen and women who are out, correct?
That's right, yeah.
And so what is that like? What is your experience of that?
Well, I'm very cognizant of the fact that my election didn't happen on its own, that in making history in the way that I did, that I stand on the shoulders of those who have come before me, who came out at a really difficult time, sometimes when their life, their health, their safety was on the line. And so I think it's important to make sure that we continue to tell our stories. That has a very positive impact at ensuring that we can change hearts and minds and even laws. And so we've got to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and welcome in this country to be who they are, to live their truth. And I think we're on this wonderful trajectory toward equality, but we have to make sure that no one's left behind.
And you could say that's particularly important now, given the rise in hate crimes we've been seeing in the last few years.
Yeah. We have seen an increase in hate crimes, in discrimination that's happening all across the country against religious minorities, racial minorities, ethnic minorities, and members of the LGBTQ community. Hate should have no place in America. And I think it's really dangerous the way that some politicians have played with these issues in a way that highlights differences and brings out that sort of hatred. We've got to make sure that everyone in the American family is included.
And so what's your message, kind of wrapping up, to some of those groups who may be targeted but may be considering running for office?
Yeah, that don't count yourself out. That just because some people may not see you as equal certainly doesn't mean you are, and that you can do amazing things. I think it's incumbent on each and every one of us to show that there's a bright path forward, that everyone can be included, that there is a better day ahead if you're facing discrimination, if you're alienated from your family. And I think by all telling our stories, by coming out, by making sure there's an inclusive environment here in Washington and across the country, we'll get to that better place.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman.
Thanks for your time.
And now I'll throw it back to Alan.
And I am here with Congressman Sherman from Sherman Oaks, and you were the first member of Congress to file articles of impeachment. Talk to me about that.
Well, the president committed a clear crime, obstruction of justice. It was on the record.
And this is specifically through the firing of Comey?
Well, first he tried to intimidate Comey to try to derail one investigation. Then he fired Comey in order to derail a similar investigation. He said so on the record. The evidence is there. I saw Comey testify under oath. It is so rare that a prosecutor gets a witness quite that good. I mean, how often do you have the FBI director there to testify? So it seemed clear that you saw a violation of Section 1512b3 of the Criminal Code. But the other part of it is people say, well, you shouldn't talk about impeachment. And maybe we shouldn't talk only about impeachment. Maybe the top leaders will choose not to talk about impeachment. But imagine what this president would have done if no one had talked about impeachment over the last year and a half or 2 years. Imagine an unrestrained Donald Trump. So I think that making it clear to the president that impeachment was a possibility is not only something that I've done, it's something that Republican senators have done. When they have said, if you fire Mueller, all hell could break loose. What hell are they talking about?
Well,
so I'm not the only one talking about impeachment. So are a few Republican senators.
Well,
they just don't spell it the way I do.
Well, at least one particular senator who said that if you fire, well, I guess in his case he was saying that if you fire Sessions, all hell will break loose. And then he didn't feel like hell should break loose when that actually happened.
It's good that for a while the president felt constrained, and he should continue to feel constrained. And we'll have to see what Mueller reports to see if we can generate enough popular interest in impeachment. But the president should feel constrained, and therefore will avoid certain things that he believes would inspire a popular wave of support for impeachment. So it's something we need to talk about while we're talking about many other things as well.
So if we're going to talk about other things as well, I know that an issue that you're very passionate about is financial reform. What should Democrats be doing? What are Democrats doing?
Well, the biggest thing we should be doing is saying too big to fail is too big to exist. The very largest financial institutions ought to be broken up. Senator Bernie Sanders and I have been carrying that legislation for several Congresses now, really since the 2008 meltdown. And we should never again have a circumstance where a single financial institution can call the White House and say, you can't let us go down because we'll take the entire economy with us. We need vibrant...
Some people would call that extortion.
Yes, but some people would just call it business as usual. So we need vibrant, medium, even medium-large institutions, but institutions where one institution cannot bring down the entire economy. Another thing, and this probably is very technical, is bond rating agencies are, I believe, the reason why we had 2008.
Well, let me pause you, because you said that's very technical, and I think you said bond rating agencies, and I heard millions of eyeballs gloss over. Explain what that is exactly.
Well, your viewers are aware of the stock market,
yes,
which is thought to be more exciting. But the big money is in the bond market. This is borrowed money, or pools of borrowed money. And what happened is that they put together pools of bad mortgages. They went to Standard & Poor's or Moody's. They paid Standard & Poor's or Moody's $1 million or more per pool. They got high ratings, and then they went and sold these bonds that were pools of bad mortgages.
So, I mean, you're explaining something that I think ought to be shocking to a lot of people.
Right.
That the people who were in charge of rating whether these are good investments or not were being paid by the people who stood to gain from it getting a good rating.
It's like, imagine the umpire is paid by one of the teams.
See, that could be problematic.
But my focus is not on who pays the umpire, but who selects the umpire. You could have a circumstance where the SEC says, this is going to be your primary bond agency. We've identified them as qualified. We've selected from the qualified by lot or in some other ways, and you have to pay them, but you don't select them. But if the Dodgers were to select the umpire, and if the umpire really wanted to be selected again and again, Kershaw would never throw a ball.
I can see how that could be a problem. Well,
Yeah.
Congressman, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that we see you frequently at NowThis.
Good.
Okay.
All right.
Hi, and we are with another congressman. Do you mind introducing yourself to our viewers?
Not at all. I'm Andy Levin from Michigan's 9th District.
Thank you. And let's talk about free college. That's kind of an exciting concept.
Yes, well, I'm really in favor of making college affordable for everybody, and also if people want to do training for other kinds of things, like to be a healthcare professional or in advanced manufacturing or construction that requires less than 4 years, I think we absolutely have to support that too. But while I was running the workforce system of Michigan, I created something called No Worker Left Behind. It was a program that gave 2 years of free tuition plus other supports to workers who lost their job, anybody who couldn't get attached to the workforce, people who were unemployed, or even if you're working for low wages and it wasn't enough to support yourself or your family. And we put 162,000 Michigan people back to school to study for certificates or degrees leading to in-demand jobs in Michigan. This was during the Great Recession. And so don't tell me we can't find a way to make college and job training affordable for all of our kids, our people, even our older workers who, have lost out and now they need a new opportunity.
The question a lot of people will ask when they hear that is, well, how would you fund it?
Well, we just take this area of job training alone. We have programs in the U.S. Department of Labor and the U.S. Department of Education, in Veterans Affairs, in HHS, the whole welfare to work area, and then we have the whole unemployment insurance system. And it's this patchwork of programs. What we need to do is get everybody together and say, what would actually work for companies who have supposedly all these job openings we always hear about? Would they invest more? Would they agree that the federal government should spend 10 or 20% more in one coherent program for all young people and all workers instead of this patchwork? I think they would, and we could increase spending on college, community college, job training, the whole spectrum for our young people and our workers. So we can do it for sure.
And another area of interest for you has been clean energy. Can you talk to us about that?
That's been a huge part of my life. Before I came to Congress, I was an entrepreneur. I created and ran a statewide clean energy program in Michigan. And we did, just last year, I think $16 million of clean energy, sort of radical energy makeovers of buildings. This thing is called Lean and Green Michigan, and we had 37 local governments covering 69% of Michiganders all joined the program. And once they joined, we could help any business or nonprofit that had a building get financing, 20-year fixed interest rate financing to put on solar panels, do geothermal, new windows, new insulation, low water, systems like low flow, low flush, everything, to reduce water use, reduce energy use, or displace energy use with renewable energy they make themselves on that site. And so we need to go we proved in Michigan we could do this. We should have a date certain by which all new buildings have to be zero net energy or better, ZNE we call it, so that they produce as much energy as they use. We've got to go so much faster on climate change, electric vehicles, right? Energy storage, solar everywhere, wind, geothermal. We can do this, create a lot of great jobs, and save our planet. Right now, we are frying our planet, and it's completely unconscionable, and it's stupid. I mean, if we want jobs, we've got to be leading on this, not acting like, oh, is climate change real? I mean, that's like Neanderthal.
And you have a very eclectic and diverse background. Can you talk to us about your experience as a union organizer and engaging in civil disobedience?
Yeah, well, when I was in college, I fought against the continuing use of a nuclear plant, the Yankee Row nuclear plant, which was supposedly at the end of its useful life. I helped my college honor a boycott of cap and gown manufacturer they used that was where the workers were on strike who produced the caps and gowns. And we actually organized a hunger strike, a week-long hunger strike at my college to try to force our trustees to boycott or divest from stock in companies that did business in South Africa. I'm that old. I was an anti-apartheid activist in college in the early 80s. And you know, we didn't win that, you know, little skirmish in the sense that those trustees didn't divest, but young people like me at colleges and universities across America and across the world all stood up and said, apartheid must end. And in that little way, we contributed to, you know, change in South Africa. And that's really been my life. I mean, I've been arrested with my rabbi and other civic leaders at the White House way back when George W. Bush wanted to drill for oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. You know, I encourage all of your viewers to stand up and think, what's their little way that they can make good trouble, that they can throw sand in the machine that keeps grinding out towards using fossil fuels, you know, towards not making the changes we need, because we can change this world and we need to right now.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Congressman.
My pleasure. Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. And we'll go back to Alan.
I'm here with Congressman Gil Cisneros from California. Now, Congressman, you are a very lucky man. Could you talk a little bit about the luck that you have experienced? Now, I'm not saying that you're lucky to have been elected, because I know that was a lot of hard work, grassroots, knocking on doors, but there's some other luck you've experienced. Talk about that.
Well, my wife would say I was lucky when I met her and I married her, but other people would say that I was lucky also because back in 2010, I won the Mega Millions lottery, which pretty much changed my life and gave me an opportunity to really make a difference in a lot of other people's lives.
And how much money did you win?
Well, the jackpot at that time was $266 million. We took the lump sum, so it was about, you know, after taxes, a little bit less than half of that total. So just, I hate to say, around $100 million. But, you know, to us it was, you know, people always ask me, you know, well, how did you feel? And I always said it was about 10 seconds of excitement and then, holy crap, like what just happened? But, you know, the exciting thing about this is that it really gave my wife and I an opportunity to really invest in students. You know, I was the first in my family to go to college. I talk about how education transformed my life and gave me opportunity that I never knew really existed before. And the lottery winnings have allowed us to go out and to do that. We started our family foundation that allowed us to invest in students. We've given over, through our foundation and through our personal giving, like over $40 million to help, you know, students, give them that same opportunity that I had through education, through scholarships, through college access programs, to get, you know, we give books to kindergartners so that they can develop a love of reading, and we support math education in elementary schools, and so it's been exciting to do that, and I'm glad I've had that opportunity to kind of give, like I said, to give other people that same opportunity through education that I had.
Now, as a suddenly very rich person, you didn't feel compelled to support the tax cut that has gone into effect. Is that something that is good for you, and is that something that's good for California?
No, the tax cut that they did was not a tax cut for Californians. They took away deductions away from people, working class families. You know, in my district, the average cost of a home is around $700,000. So people that used to be able to take a deduction for their state and local income tax to deduct their mortgage costs from their, the mortgage interest that they're paying on their loan, they couldn't do that anymore. And it raised their taxes. And so we were not a fan of this Republican tax bill. I'm not going to call it a tax cut because that's not what it was. But, we weren't a fan. And a lot of people in my district weren't a fan of that tax bill as well. And I think that's why you saw a lot of change in Southern California. You have Republican representatives that supported that bill that are no longer there anymore.
Now, there has been some talk raised recently of raising the marginal tax rate on the top earners. Mm-hmm. Now that you have joined the ranks of the very wealthy, what do you feel about taxing high-income individuals more to contribute more to the overall government?
Everybody needs to pay their fair share. I think what we need to do is to change the tax system and how we pay our taxes. When we talk about the tax rate, we're originally talking about earned income. When you look at somebody like Warren Buffett, or even myself to a point, before I came to Congress, a lot of the money that we made is coming through investments. That's taxed at a lot lower interest rate than personal income that you make, that people make, getting their salaries every day by going to work every day. That's what we need to change. That's what we need to focus on. And I think, by adjusting those tax rates and taxing that income at a higher rate, it's going to help and it's going to benefit and allow us to do greater good, for those that need it.
So even though you are now a very wealthy person, you believe that the wealthy should be doing more to pay their fair share?
I think so. And and it's not just by paying taxes. I think one of the reasons we were always out front about our philanthropy and what we did was because we wanted to be an example to others. Those that have the means, that are wealthy, and a lot of them do, but they need to give back in other ways too, right? It's not just contributing to the the U.S. Treasury. I would hope that they would also get involved in their communities and really helping students and doing other things. I think the Gates and Warren Buffett have been tremendous examples of trying to get people to donate half their wealth and to put it in towards philanthropy, to helping others. And I think that's an example that all of us can do, even if you don't have the resources financially. There's still other things that you can do to make an impact that can help others less fortunate than you.
And then last question, what should Democrats do to protect financial security for people so that people who want to pay off their college loans, people who want to save for their retirement and hope that someday they'll be able to retire, so that people don't end up relying on a lottery ticket to be the solution?
No, it's like the lottery is no way. I was very lucky to win that, and it was by mere chance, and that is no way to solve your financial future, because the chances are most people are not going to win that. But
I have a couple friends at home who play the lottery too much. I hope you heard that. Just wanted to go on record.
Yeah, but the thing is, we need to invest in education. We need to make it more affordable for students to attend college. UC Berkeley did a study a while back. It said for every dollar we invest in higher education, we get a $4.50 return. That's where we need to put our investments, right? Who would turn down a 450% return, right? So we need to make it more affordable for students to go to college. We need to bring up Pell Grants and align with the current cost of tuition. We need to change the college loan process and put it in favor of the students instead of in the banks. I was very fortunate. We talk about the lottery, really, but really my good fortune started when I joined the Navy at 18 years old. I got picked up for an ROTC scholarship. The Navy paid for my education. They paid for my MBA. They paid for my master's degree. All my education that I owe is because of the federal government paying for it. But I don't think I should be the exception. There's other programs that we could do. You shouldn't have to join the military, but maybe you give back to your community, right? I had a friend who gave 3 years of community service in order to have his college debt, taken away. There's a Peace Corps. There's the AmeriCorps programs. You teach in our schools where we need good people. These are the things that we need to invest in, and the programs that we need to get people interested in to help them wipe out their college debt.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much. Congratulations on your victory.
Well, thank you very much.
And I hope that we're going to be seeing a lot more of you.
Well, thank you. Look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
And now I'll pass it back to Zinkley.
Well, I am
Hi, are you going to be speaking to me next?
Caston, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Zinkley.
Can you tell our viewers who you represent?
Illinois 6th District, western suburbs of Chicago, kind of wraps around O'Hare Airport but doesn't include O'Hare Airport.
Okay, and I hear you all have a polar vortex going on.
Indeed we do. It is. I'm glad to be in D.C. this week. My children are freezing. I think it's -40 out there tonight with wind chill.
Wow. Does that have to do with climate change or?
Well, if you listen to the president, it's proof that climate change isn't happening, but he's wrong. The tragedy is that there's these like Arctic winds, and as you get more warm air coming up from the south, you start melting these chunks of the Arctic, and you get pulses of cold water that melts and comes down. And so the climate change models actually tell you that you will get these periodic swoops of cold air that come down that aren't supposed to happen. In a stable climate, those winds stay in the Arctic. In a warming climate, they gradually come down as we suck the cold, if you will, out of the Arctic. And for the time being, it's cold, but it's because we are getting so much hotter.
Oh, wow. And you are a freshman member of the class, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
How has it been, your first few weeks?
Well, I voted on the same thing 11 times. It's an awesome class. The number of people in this class who, if they died tomorrow, would have really, really impressive resumes regardless of their runs for Congress is pretty neat. And it's just really inspiring how many people were called to public service because of Trump. And I think it makes the body of Congress a much more interesting and diverse and hopefully effective place. Having said that, spending the first 22 days trying to basically undo damage that was done 13 days before we got sworn in is not exactly how I was hoping to start out, but you play the cards you're dealt, and so that's where we've been.
Do you believe that we will enter into another government shutdown once we hit February 15th?
I sure hope not. I think the president's speech that he gave last weekend, the first half of it was him saying, "I bow down before Leader Pelosi." And the second half of it was, "Please don't hurt me, and Coulter." So I think he's been pretty thoroughly humiliated, and I hope he's learned his lesson. But I mean, how rational is the president going to be? It's scary because you're not dealing with a rational actor. You're dealing with somebody with a very fragile ego, who made outlandish promises to his base to get elected, and is now willing to take the whole country hostage to fulfill those. So I hope we're through. But we'll keep our fingers crossed.
And beyond the government shutdown, of course, there are policies you have wanted to implement a lot, focusing on the environment. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so I've spent the last 20 years trying to do something about climate change. I started out as a biochemist working on cellulosic biofuels, and then became an engineer, tried to develop some new technologies, and then basically came to the conclusion that there are so many clean energy technologies that are totally proven, totally economic, and totally underdeployed, that this wasn't a science problem. So that led me to put on an entrepreneurial hat, built a couple companies. We built a couple $100 million worth of assets, about 80 projects. Every single one of them was at least twice as efficient as the grid. And we gradually realized that while there were no thermodynamic laws that kept us from doing a lot more, there were no economic laws that kept us from doing a lot more, there were a lot of United States laws that got in the way. And so when we sold our company, sort of figured, let me see if I can try to step into a role where I can do something about those other laws.
Well, thank you, Congressman. We'll look forward to seeing what you do.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
I'll pass it along to Alan.
And I'm here with Congressman Hicks from New York. Always good to talk to a fellow New Yorker. Now, you represent a district that was particularly impacted by the shutdown because you represent JFK, the airport. Talk to me about how workers at the airport were affected and everyone else in the community.
Well, they were devastated. I went on several occasions to meet with TSA representatives and individuals that were working during their shift. Many of them did not know how to plan because they're not making a lot of money, so they're living paycheck to paycheck. And to get into the airport, oftentimes it is difficult. So individuals were trying to make a decision sometimes as to whether or not they would put gas in their car to get to the airport as opposed to buying food for their families because they didn't have enough money to do both.
And these are people who are literally working to keep everyone safe.
Safe, that is correct. And so they had those issues. And so there was a number of individuals in the community, as well as some of their brethren who were all part of various labor unions, were coming in with groceries to distribute to them to try to keep them afloat while this shutdown was taking place, and in fact is still taking place. And
and they have
as
not
far as
yet
getting
been paid.
that's exactly right. That's what I meant when I say still taking place. They have yet to get paid, and the president still threatening to do it again. So that's serious. And then there's other ramifications of which we heard them talking about. One of the reasons why I put a bill in recently, because I now chair the Committee on Consumer Protection and Financial Institutions, is that some have paid bills late to no fault of their own.
Yeah.
But it will have a long-term effect on them in that late payments will affect your credit rating overall. And
Yes.
we know how important good credit is right now. And so I've got a bill in saying that the individual credit agencies should, if individuals can produce an ID that they were from a certain federal agency that was affected by this shutdown, that they should not have reported on their credit report that they had late payments, which will affect them because that still has a long-term effect on those individuals, as well as give some of the financial institutions an incentive so that if people who were victimized by the shutdown, that if they made sure that if they had to borrow money, because some did, that those dollars are at zero interest, and then those banks could get what's called Community Reinvestment Act, CRA credit, that will help them. So trying to incentivize banks to make sure that those that had to take out loans to try to make it over, that they don't have to pay above and beyond what their salaries would have been and pay that extra interest rates.
Now, it seemed as if the president and his administration seemed to think that banks, your mortgage holder, your grocery store, your landlord might be willing to just let things slide. That's not generally the case with banks and stores and landlords, is it?
No, it's not. And that's why we try to incentivize the bigger banks and et cetera to do something, because they may have the wherewithal to make and give an extra hand to do the right thing. But small businesses, they don't have that availability because they were hurt also because of the shutdown, because less people were able to go shop in their stores. And they have payrolls to meet and people that they had to pay that they had to almost lay off because of the lack of business that they were getting. So there was a trickle-down effect on even small businesses in the community as a result of the shutdown, because people didn't have the wherewithal to continue to shop in the places that they normally would shop. And so that, rubbed the wrong way for average everyday individuals in my district, and I assume in other districts like it, particularly those areas where there are a large number of federal employees who live and work in areas like mine.
Now, we know that the 800,000 federal employees who have been going unpaid will eventually be paid for the time that they've missed, but there's nothing in place for the tens of thousands of government contractors, which includes janitors, cafeteria workers, security guards. There has been a push from Democrats to provide some sort of back payment or relief for them. Can you give us any insight on that?
Yeah, we are looking at a number of bills and a number of ideas that have come forward through the Democratic caucus to try to make sure that they're whole also, because that would be a hole in a loss that could be unrecoverable for some individuals. And so I think that we have an obligation to do that, and as well as an obligation is a number of bills that are coming forward to make sure that no American is held hostage because of a political promise or otherwise, or us not getting done what we're supposed to get done here in Washington, D.C. To make individuals, as you said, contractors and or federal workers, to suffer or hold them basically hostage, in this case particularly for a campaign promise that the president lied about in the first place, that is to build a wall that the Mexicans were going to pay for, and with no substantiation on how that wall will make us safer and or really protect our borders is just absolutely ridiculous. And so I think we have a responsibility as members of Congress to make sure that it never happens again, and that we make whole again everybody that was affected by this shutdown as a result of the actions here. Clearly it was the Trump shutdown. And I think that we've got to put that in check, because I have concerns, real concerns, about what this president will or will not do now and or in the future. You know, you mentioned that I'm a New Yorker. I've happened to have had the opportunity to observe him as a New Yorker oftentimes. And some say, and I try to say this, you know, often, because it's not just me talking as a partisan Democrat who have seen this individual, because Republicans, whether it's Marco Rubio, whether it's Mitt Romney, whether it's George Bush, whether it's Lindsey Graham, they've all said this. They've looked at the life of the current president and said, he's a liar, he's a con man, he is unethical. This is not Greg Meeks saying it, this is what they've said at any given time. And I don't think that his conduct is going to change at any time, because that's who he is. And so I'm concerned about the fact that we're having the State of the Union address, and he will try to come to con America and fool America again with some rhetoric to try to get around the Constitution to find some funding for his made-up war, and or shut the government down, and the people who have been suffering for all of the time that this government has been shut down, then again goes into a world of uncertainty. And we're going, as Democrats, we're moving forward and trying to protect the individuals with our For People agenda, and to make sure that we put a check on what's taking place with the guy that's in the White House right now.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much for your time. And I hope that we see you often at NowThis.
Look forward to doing it.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, this has been Millennial Media Row, Alan.
Yes, it has. This has been our second year of doing this. It has been a great time. I saw that you spoke with a lot of members of Congress. Is there an overall takeaway that you got from the people that you spoke to?
Absolutely. So a lot of the freshman members talked about how impactful it was to start during the longest U.S. government shutdown ever. I think that had a big impact on the policies they've been able to enact, which are basically none. But they have big visions moving forward, and I'm excited to see what they do.
Al, I am eager to see what they do. I think I had a similar impression from the people that I spoke to, and we're all going to find out what's going to happen in these next few weeks. There will be a State of the Union.
Yes.
There may be a government shutdown.
We'll see.
There may be a national emergency.
We hope not.
There may be something entirely else, but whatever it is, I'm sure that you can learn a lot about it at NowThis. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for joining us. This is Sinclair Samoa.
I'm Alan Piper.
And we'll see you next time.
Congratulations. All right. Guys, thank you very much.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Well, that was,
all right.
This is a lot smoother than last year.
Wait, nobody move. I wanted to get a photo. Yes.
Oh, yes, we should. We must.
Sorry, I know we weren't supposed to talk.
Oh, we weren't supposed to?
Well, I think we're fine. You're fine? Okay. He had his thinking face on.
Audio's been clear for a while.
Okay.
Rob's always prepared, but you never know.
All right. Should we do,
yeah.
Should we do it like we're talking
Oh,
to the
that's
camera
true.
right now?
Yes,
All right.
we'll talk to Zara.
Yes. Oh, and Zara's going to be getting a shot from there. So we are.
We're talking still.
Yes. All right.